Excelsior, true believers! You are about to embark upon a journey, a trip to the 70s and 80s when mighty Marvel Comics ruled over all. The Defenders, Doctor Strange, the Champions, Deathlock, the Submariner, the Incredible Hulk, Killraven, the Son of Satan, the Macabre Man-Thing, and all your other Bronze Age favorites every week appearing on Defenders Dialogue. Now here are your guides, Christopher Golden and Brian Keene.
Excelsior, true believers.
Excelsior indeed. Good to be back with you, Chris Golden.
Good to be back with you, Brian Keene. Adventure into Fear 16. You know, you were so right when you were talking about how, I was saying we were moving on from supervillain team up and people were going to be happy because we wouldn't be talking about politics in comics, but it's really inescapable as a subject matter. But in any case, funnily enough, once upon a time, Brian, we would not have even been taking note of the fact that, these comic scripts are quote unquote political. It's only in response to all of those, flaccid man babies in Comicsgate, who insist that comics weren't political once upon a time. And so we must point out that contrary to that Trumpian insistence, that comics are indeed political.
Well, exactly. And I mean, not for nothing, but this issue, the issue we're going to cover first, is published in 1973. And once again, there are elements here that you could transpose to 2020. The more things change, the more they stay the same. But yeah, we open Adventure into Fear issue 16. Steve Gerber, of course, writing. Val Merrick, still the artist, with Sal Trapani as the inker. And we open with a gorgeous splash page of the Man-Thing, and he's watching some indigenous peoples who live in the Everglades. He's watching a young man argue with his father, who we learn is also the chieftain of their tribe. And he's telling him, an excavation is going to begin tomorrow unless they stop it. If they fail, their swamp, their homeland, is going to be replaced by an airport. And the father tells him, so you would resort to violence? Are there no legal means? And right away, page 2, we get into politics. So, suck on that, Comicsgate.
Right. Well, page 2, again, you have... So first, let me point this out. Although this is political and has an edge to it in 1973, there was no effort to stop referring to Native Americans as Indians.
Right.
And the young men in this, or the people who are part of this tribe, are referred to as braves. So if we slip and refer to people in that regard, it's because we're referring to the script that we're looking at here.
Exactly. It's important to remember, as I was explaining to Dungeon Master this week, he's currently reading Stephen King's It, and the word queer is used in that book as a slur. Right. As it was in the time period that King is trying to capture in It. What I found very uplifting is that Dungeon Master only knows the word queer as a good word, as in LGBTQ. Right. And he didn't understand its usage in It. I had to explain it to him. The same thing is here. Steve Gerber, we know exactly where his politics lay, and we know that listeners know that from previous issues of this podcast, but he was using the verbiage of the time.
Right. And so in that regard, on that second page, the young man says to his father, who is also the chieftain, "Father, the white men have never even signed a treaty with our tribe. Not that it matters, every Indian treaty they have signed, they have broken. And again, like, of course I couldn't, read this without thinking of the Dakota Access Pipeline.
Oh, yeah.
Everything that's happened up there in the last few years. But continue.
So while these two are arguing, I guess he's the younger brother, slips away into a canoe. Now, I want to point out, for those who read along at home or are going to read along at home later, or those who are listening to this on YouTube, you're going to see this young man dressed like he just stepped out of a Hollywood Western. Okay. Right. But there's a reason for that. So we see him slip into a canoe and he drifts away deep into the swamp, and the Man Thing follows because he's curious. And when the young man gets there, he sees a bunch of other young guys his age. We find out his name is Black Eagle, and he and his teenage friends have decided they can't wait for the old people. They're going to go to war in, quote, tribal costumes. So they're dressed like this on purpose. It's a political statement.
Right.
Go ahead, Chris.
No, and again, to that end, when we see the older brother on the previous pages, he's dressed in ordinary street clothes. I wasn't sure, though, if Gerber had scripted it this way intentionally, or if this was just the way Val Mayerik had drawn it, and Gerber then had to explain it in his captions.
In reading an extensive interview with Gerber about his time on Man Thing, it was on purpose. And if I recall correctly, he had to actually fight to get it in there.
Interesting.
So yeah, even back then, there was.
Right. Well, so we have, and then we get to, Brian, you're usually, and I say this, with love and respect, you are usually the voice of the working man, when we get to these topics. But I'm going to jump in here, and say we meet these guys who are, and this becomes a really interesting conversation, so pertinent to today. We meet these guys who are laborers. There's the foreman. There are these guys who are going to be the ones who are going to be excavating the swamp and building the airport. They feel safe because the Man Thing is dead. And we get into this. I'm just going to hit on it. The overarching theme here. We get into this idea that you have the Native Americans who are trying to protect their home, whether it's their tribal land, but even more importantly, it's their home where they live.
Exactly.
And these guys who need a job, and this is their job, and this is the job that they've been given. And what we see from the macro point of view here is a society that has pitted these two groups against one another. So yeah, a lot of these working class guys are hateful. But they also are talking about how they have to have a job.
Exactly.
And they perceive the Native Americans who are trying to disrupt their work as a direct threat to their livelihood. So again, it's the way the dynamic is set up in this society that these two groups are pitted against one another instead of against the people who put them in this position to begin with.
Exactly. And Gerber was always masterful. We've seen it during his Defenders run. We see it again here. He's always masterful at giving voice to both of those disparate groups. We saw it just a couple episodes ago with the racist cop and the escaped con, and how both of them ended up being kind of reprehensible. Right. But Gerber, even though one was clearly worse than the other, Gerber makes you empathize with both of them. And he does that here to some extent as well.
Look, Andrew Vox, crime writer, attorney, crusader for children who are the victims of abuse, had always said, and I remember this so clearly, and it sits with me always, you can sympathize, I'm paraphrasing, you can sympathize with how the monster becomes a monster without sympathizing with the monster.
Exactly.
So I have zero sympathy for these guys. I hope they get their fucking asses kicked, and they're racist assholes. However, I sympathize with how they got there. Does that make sense?
Right. And Gerber is gonna show us firsthand how they got there. The main blue collar guy we're going to be talking about is Jake. Jake is the foreman, and he works for a man who will become one of the biggest villains in Man Thing's Rogues Gallery, and that is Mr. F.A. Schist. F.A. Schist. What do you think Gerber was trying to say there?
I don't know. Say it 5 times fast, Brian.
Fascist. Yes, the F.A. Schist Construction Company. While Jake and his guys are chilling and having a little coffee, some late night talk on the construction site, what's his name? Brave Eagle or Black Eagle?
Black Eagle, yeah.
Black Eagle. He and his friends attack. They manage to throw a Molotov cocktail at a bulldozer. But in the skirmish, Jake shoots Black Eagle in the back, doesn't kill him, gets ready to kill him when suddenly the Man Thing appears.
Indeed. And of course, bullets do nothing against the Man Thing. And would you say his name was Jake?
Yeah, Jake.
Foreman, runs screaming, as you would, away from the Man Thing, who grabs, Black Eagle and carries him to the home of Dr. Warren Thompson.
Now, I want a no prize here, Chris, because this is not the first time the Man Thing has carried, someone he found in the swamp to the doctor's home. He did it with the baby who the father threw away over, know. But Dr. Thompson and his wife are drawn completely different, inked completely different in this sequence. And I want a no prize for that. So anyway,
for a no prize, wait a second. For a no prize, you have to explain why they look different. As
we found out on last week's episode, the Man Thing's swamp is the nexus of all realities. So clearly,
is the Dr. and Mrs. Thompson from a parallel reality.
Exactly, they're from Earth 617 rather than Earth 616.
I see. So they're totally unaware that they've now been dovetailed into a different timeline, like most of us feel over the last 4 years.
Mandela effect, baby. It's real. It's a real thing.
I apologize for what I think somebody back there somewhere is mowing their lawn. I hope that's not coming.
We're not picking it up at all.
Through.
So, okay. So we get to the next morning, and F.A. Schist himself is surveying the damage to the construction site. The police are there. Schist finds out, of course, that Jake shot Black Eagle, and he says, "You idiot! Now you've given them a martyr and a cause, but nothing will stop me." He's going to go see a judge. So while that's happening, on the main square of nearby Citrusville, there is a citizens' rally, a citizens' protest to save the swamp. And attending that protest, we see, of course, our supporting characters, Jennifer and Andy Cale and their grandfather, Joshua, and that weird guy who's a member of Joshua's cult, but always seems to be, throwing salt into whatever Joshua's trying to do.
Yes, exactly. His name is Bertrand or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. I don't know why Joshua keeps this guy around.
Yeah, I just want to point out that all I could think of while I was reading this sequence is, Jesus, I can't think of the name. Is it Hoot? The young adult novel about the kids who decide they have to save the habitat of the owls.
I don't know that one.
Made into a film with Shia LaBeouf, I think.
Yeah.
My kids are of the right age to have, but anyway, suffice to say, all of a sudden, the protest is interrupted by Jake and his horde of, shirtless and or wearing, tank tops workers, all of them still in their hard hats from the job site, who take over the stage, you folks have been sounding off about the birds and snakes and their ecology. What about my ecology? I don't work. My kids don't eat. That's the simplest ecology there is, right? So here's where we get what I'm talking about. And again, it's fascinating to me because look, this guy is an asshole. But again, like to me, it's like your fears are valid.
Exactly.
But
and he tells the crowd, he's like, we're not villains. We're just hardworking guys trying to earn $1. Now, spoiler warning.
So assholes who shot a young Native American guy in the back.
Yeah. Jake is in fact a villain, but he does not see himself as such. And again, you could transpose this to 2020. And I know, living where I do factually, I know folks who voted the way they did in the last election, not because they saw themselves as villains, but because they were hardworking people trying to earn $1, to quote Jake, who now absolutely have misgivings about that. And see that, oh, yeah, hey, I voted for the Red Skull.
Right. And maybe the Red Skull manipulated me into perceiving the wrong people as the villains. But a lot of them still don't see that. I also want to point out that I posted on Facebook this morning that last night I watched a 1937 Humphrey Bogart film called Black Legion that works in context with this so well. Because Black Legion, Humphrey Bogart plays a machinist who works at a factory where he believes he is in line for a promotion, but the promotion goes to a younger guy who is Polish and definitely deserves it more than he does.
Right.
And because of his resentment toward that, he is recruited into a white nationalist or nationalist organization that is violent and extreme, and they rip that Polish guy and his father out of their home and send them packing and burn down their home and all of this stuff. And literally, this movie Black Legion could be made today, except the victims in Black Legion are like Polish and Irish guys who are quote unquote foreigners,
right?
And obviously, the foreigners in today's version would be different. But reading this in context of that, I was like, it's the same. So we're talking, this is 1973, but Black Legion is 1937, Brian.
Yep.
Fascinating. But go ahead.
Well, this is my favorite sequence. And this is where Steve Gerber is better than anyone in comics. The folks on the left who were having the rally, they get the microphone back from Jake, and a fight breaks out. And between the protesters and the workers. And in one panel, in one single half-page panel, Gerber displays the ugliness, the rot and the infection that comes from such polarized people. The work crew, its members angry because they cannot survive without betraying this town, or, put together, and in one blow, it's all it takes. And you see them fighting each other, and the ugliness on both sides. It's what we're seeing right now. Just this group reduced to violence on both sides. It's just fascinating to go back and read this.
I have to interrupt you though, because every time you use the phrase "both sides," all I can think of is Trump saying there are good people on both sides.
Well, that's not what I mean. Clearly,
no, I know it's not what you mean, but that's why I want it, just in case anyone is mistaking, anyone is triggered by that phrase, or triggered by my use of the word triggered, and not listening to what you're saying. You aren't suggesting that there isn't a right and wrong in this argument. Only that the hate on both sides is palpable in the story that we're telling.
Yeah. We get them taunting each other. We get one of the ecologists, one of the protesters saying, "You crummy hard hat, I'll bet your brain is hard too. You'd sell your own mother to earn $1," while punches are being thrown. And then on the other group, You have blasted radical berserkos. Let's show them how real men fight while throwing punches. It's just, I love the breakdown of violence here, where
Right.
everyone in this group just is broken down to their base.
Right.
But then
to their fury.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But then F.A. Schist comes out and he says, he has a court order banning any further demonstrations and empowering him to evict the indigenous people from the swamp as of 6 a.m. tomorrow.
Right. But we cut to the next morning, and an airboat with F.A. Schist and the sheriff and a few other police officers is flying through the swamp, and they are interrupted by an arrow, Brian, of all things. They find themselves face to face with the young members of the Native American tribe who are still in their throwback regalia.
Right.
And they're basically, the summary of this is they warn people away, they threaten them, and Schist thinks this has got to be a practical joke if this guy thinks he can stop me with bows and arrows. But the sheriff tells him, yeah, this was a practical joke. In other words, the way that they confronted you was a practical joke, but the threat is real. Get out of here or we will kill you.
That's right. Which is a nice transition to what happens to the Man-Thing, because he shows up at the construction site. And Jake and the other workers spot him, and they're like, "Get out of here! We're going to kill you." Jake takes over the new bulldozer, and orders his workers to get torches and axes and keep the monster at bay. And while they do, he scoops the Man-Thing up along with the swamp, and then dumps the scoop, basically burying the Man-Thing under tons of mud and rock, and then he drives the bulldozer over the Man-Thing, flattening him. But of course, as we know, that's not going to do anything. The Man-Thing reforms. Jake is horrified by this.
Such a great sequence.
Yeah, long story short, he realizes he can't kill the Man-Thing. He's fearful. And of course, Chris, what happens to whatever knows fear?
Well, I want to point out one thing before we get to that refrain, my friend. And that is that as Jake is trying to escape, when he's looking in terror at the fact that the Man-Thing has basically regrown out of the muck, that his foot, as he tries to flee off of the bulldozer, knocks off the brake.
That's right.
And then he tries to kill the Man-Thing, and the Man-Thing, of course, as you say, whatever knows fear, burns at the Man-Thing's touch. The Man-Thing burns Jake's face with his hand. Jake fumbles into the path of the bulldozer that he himself has set in motion, and that's all she wrote, Jake.
That's right. It's like Theodore Sturgeon's Killdozer, which Marvel also adapted the same year this issue was published. But yeah, he's dead. He's dead.
Yes.
And that's it.
Yep. Yeah. It's the looks on the guys' faces as they watch their buddy get bulldozed. And yes, Killdozer is an American classic.
That's right.
So the Man-Thing has done his job. They all run away, but the Man-Thing, wanders off. My son Dan and I were talking about this sort of classic conceit of the wandering samurai or the Ronin from Akira Kurosawa to Clint Eastwood's Man with No Name films. We follow sort of that, and how that trope was sort of bled into American pop culture in the Kung Fu TV show, the Incredible Hulk TV show, and of course in comics like the Man-Thing. He's not wandering around the world or the country, but it is this thing where he wanders into a situation, is a catalyst to change, and then wanders out. Exactly.
So you mentioned on last week's episode that we went from horror to fantasy. This week we went into politics, and then Gerber flips the script again, for Adventure into Fear 17. Now, folks, Chris and I have agreed we're probably going to blow through this particular issue very quickly, and you'll understand why in a moment. But I do want to talk about the fact that it's the first appearance of one of my favorite Marvel Z-list characters.
Of course you love this character.
Well, I love what becomes of him later. Wundarr is the character's name, and he is absolutely a Marvel Comics stand-in for Superman, as we'll get to here in a moment.
And there are several Marvel Comics stand-ins for Superman, and of them, he's the worst.
Right. But
he's a total Z-list character, and I will also say this, that, I've talked about not reading the Man-Thing when I was a kid, and that I read a few issues here and there, and I never understood why it didn't really catch on with me. And it wasn't this issue. But correct me if I'm wrong, that Wundarr reappears in Man-Thing.
Oh, yes. Wundarr becomes an occasional supporting character.
Yes. And I guarantee you, having read this now, I was like, oh, it's this character that made me not want to read the Man-Thing. Because I think that I read an issue with Wundarr, and I was like, this is really fucking dumb. And then it turned me off.
Well, what they do with him, he later becomes, along with Black Goliath, whose series we've covered here on this podcast, he and Black Goliath sort of become recurring supporting characters in Marvel 2-in-1.
Yes. Project Pegasus saga.
Right. And after the Project Pegasus saga, Wundarr transforms into a character called the Aquarian. Now, Wundarr is a stand-in for Superman. The Aquarian becomes a stand-in for Jesus Christ. And I just...
Tomato.
Yeah, I love that whole... I as a writer, as a creator, I love what they did with Wundarr. When I was a kid, I was kind of ambivalent about him, but as an adult, I love the storyline.
My childhood antipathy toward Wundarr may turn into an affection as we go through this series.
All right. So we open up, same creative team. The Man-Thing comes across a crashed flying saucer in the swamp. And I don't even know that we need to spend a minute on this. Basically, he knocks it over and he hears something knocking inside of it. So he opens it up and a being emerges. It's an adult body, but it has the mind of a baby. And what we find out is that it's from a planet called Dakam.
Also known as Krypton.
Yes. 24 Earth years ago, this being who is Wundarr, his parents figured out that the sun around Dakam was going to go supernova. And when they warned their government covered it up. So they sent their baby in a spaceship to Earth.
And they both were killed.
That's right.
And the mother, as the father is killed, and as the mother is being killed, she manages to get the baby into the craft and shoot him off into space. Right. And then this is the Gerber moment that I really do appreciate here, is that you have this moment where the analogies for Ma and Pa Kent, the old couple driving by, see the craft smash into the swamp, and the guy is saying, that might have been something in that there rocket. Maybe I oughta. And the Ma Kent version says, Pa, you stay right here. It could be Martians or communists. You could get your full self ray gunned.
And that's it.
So instead of saving him like Jonathan and Martha Kent did to Kal-El, he's stuck in this tube for 24 years.
That's right. So he grows, into an adult inside the spaceship. He believes that the interior of the spaceship is the entire world and that he's the only thing in that world until the Man-Thing breaks him free.
And then, I have to interrupt you, and then instead of it being Superman, it's no longer Superman. It's now the classic illustrated children's book, Are You My Mother?
Yeah, because he sees the Man-Thing standing before him, and Wundarr presumes that this is his mother. He bounds toward the Man-Thing, but like any newborn baby, he cannot control his muscles, which are, of course, more powerful than any Earthman's. So he sends himself plunging 3 miles up into the air and then back down into F.A. Schist's construction site.
Yes. And we get a cutaway to Jennifer Kale, who is having a nightmare. She murmurs a single word, but we're not privy to what that word is, Brian. Then she wakes from the nightmare. Her grandfather and Andy come in. She saw something in a dream. Joshua tells her it's all right, but then we have a thought bubble from him saying, no, it isn't. But how can I tell her? Could she cope with what these dreams may mean? And what I love is that based on what you've told me about Steve Gerber's writing process, it's possible that he did this and he didn't know what the dreams meant.
Yeah, he had no idea.
For what comes later. And then, Brian, we get the interaction that is everything in this issue.
Of course, we've mentioned Hank the alligator many times, named after our dear friend Hank Wagner. Hi, Hank. He's listening to us right now as he goes to sleep on his Alexa.
Wake up, Hank.
Yeah, Wundarr comes across one of Hank's friends. It's another alligator. And, Wundarr, he thinks it's going to be his friend because it wiggles and plays and makes him smile. It makes funny noises. But then it strikes out and Wundarr smacks it against a tree and kills it.
Yeah. It's like Frankenstein and the little girl by the pond.
Exactly.
Or the monster of Frankenstein. Anyway, continue.
Yeah. The breakdown here is very easy. Wundarr stumbles into Man-Thing. They fight because the Man-Thing doesn't understand what it wants. They end up in Citrusville at 2:00 in the morning. The people come out. They see Wundarr. They see the Man-Thing. They start throwing rocks at the Man-Thing. And, Wundarr joins in. He thinks this is a thing you should do.
Well, then the Man-Thing gets sad and goes to walk back to the swamp because he's growing weaker away from the swamp. And Wundarr has his little feelings hurt and thinks his mommy's leaving him. And he goes onto his knees to beg forgiveness. And he realizes that, this wasn't actually his mother all along. But then, when the Man-Thing oozes out of Wundarr's grasp, Wundarr gets afraid.
That's
and of
right.
course, Man-Thing smacks him in the head. Wundarr's face burns a little bit. And he realizes, no, this is definitely not his mother. He shoves the Man-Thing over into the swamp and bounds away, leaping across the sky, Hulk-like, in search of his mother, and thankfully out of this story for a little while.
That's right. Now, before we get to our final issue of this episode, which is the first issue of one of my favorite Bronze Age Marvel titles, Marvel 2-in-1, Chris, you're reading these in the collected editions. I'm reading the original floppies. The Bullpen's Bulletins page, the letter page for this issue has a half-page ad for something brand new from Marvel in 1973, Foom magazine, the fanzine produced by Marvel. Yep, which, as we know, our dear friend Scott Edelman worked on quite a bit. So it cost $2.50, which was a lot of money back in 1970.
That was a lot of money back then.
But yeah, so that was a neat little thing. So yeah, we go to
perspective for the youngsters listening. For perspective, we're about to do Marvel 2-in-1 #1, which was 20 cents at the time.
That's right. So yeah, Marvel 2-in-1 issue 1, written by Steve Gerber, drawn by Gil Kane, and inked by Joe Sennett. And we open with, bashful Benjamin Grimm, the ever-loving blue-eyed thing, at a newsstand in New York City, and he's angry because the New York Times has front page coverage of the Thing from the Florida swamp.
Yeah, one of my absolute favorite characters of all time, the Thing. I love Ben Grimm as a character. And he's been stranded here. He's in a bus station waiting to go home to New York City when he sees the headline and he reads about the Man-Thing, and he's pissed off that the Man-Thing is stealing away his name. He feels like it's impinging upon his name. Oh God.
And what I love about this, he's gonna go to the Everglades and confront the Man-Thing, but he's going by bus.
Yep.
He didn't borrow a Fantastic car from Reed Richards. He didn't borrow an Avengers Quinjet. Gerber, I love what Gerber does here. He breaks the Man-Thing down to something, or excuse me, the Thing down to something every reader can identify with. He's traveling by bus.
Yes, and in those days, traveling by bus long distance is I don't think as common now as it once was. No. But I remember taking the bus from Massachusetts to Miami as a kid. That was a long bus ride.
The last time I did it was World Horror Denver, which I believe was 2000. And I took the bus from Buffalo, New York to Denver, Colorado, and then Denver, Colorado back to Baltimore. And the ride there was great. There was an Olympic athlete on the bus with me, and he and I sort of bonded. We had a layover in Chicago for a night. We had a great time. The ride from Denver to Baltimore sucked because somebody lifted my wallet at the Denver bus station, and I rode home broke for several days. No money, nothing to eat. It was horrible.
That's not good.
Yeah. So that was my last experience on a Greyhound.
Yeah.
But hopefully the Thing has better luck. I don't see anybody pickpocketing him.
No, and we should point out that there are references and flashbacks here to the reason he ended up at this bus station in the middle of nowhere, which is that in Marvel Feature number 11 and number 12, even though this is the first issue of Marvel 2-in-1, those functioned essentially as a primer for Marvel 2-in-1, because in Marvel Feature 11, it was the Thing and the Hulk. In number 12, it was the Thing and Iron Man. And those adventures ended up here in the middle of nowhere. He was going to take the bus back to New York, but instead he's on the bus. And I have to say, the art of him reclining in his seat, this Gil Kane art of him sort of pondering his life. Maybe I'm being oversensitive, but when you look like me, a little glory is all you got on earth, and it hurts to see it slip away, he's thinking, with this fantastic, I love that panel by Gil Kane. It's gorgeous.
Absolutely. Gil Kane, his stuff is always either hit or miss with me. Loved him on DC's Sword of the Atom. I don't know if you remember that miniseries from the 80s. Love him on Conan. Some of his stuff on Avengers never struck me, but my favorite thing for him to draw is the Thing. Yeah. I love seeing him draw the Thing. But speaking of being stuck in the middle of nowhere, we transition to a nameless world in a cosmos other than our own, where the former Earth man known as the Molecule Man is dying.
And unfortunately for those of us who always thought the Molecule Man was a stupid villain, he has a son.
That's right. Now
fulfill the Molecule Man. His skill was that, or his power was that he could manipulate molecules, but he couldn't affect anything living. And he has figured out how to change that so that he does affect living molecules, but he dies before he can treat himself with that. And his son steps up to the plate, treats himself with that treatment, and he is now more powerful as the Molecule Man than his father ever was. But he also, when he emerges from this treatment, says, "Even my simple robes have been transformed to a far more fearsome manner of garb, and he looks like a character out of a crossover between Caligula and Xanadu.
So he takes
his fearsome garb is the stupidest looking thing ever in the history of comics.
Yeah, it's up there. It's definitely top 5. So he takes the Molecule Man's wand, his father's wand, which we'll find out in the 80s during the Secret Wars crossover event that the Molecule Man doesn't need that wand anymore. But back in the 70s, he still did. He takes the wand and travels to Earth, where he's going to take his revenge on the Fantastic Four. He materializes in the Florida Everglades. He says, something's wrong. I should have materialized in New York. So why am I here? And he doesn't meet the Thing. He meets the Man-Thing.
He was trying to home in on Ben Grimm's cosmic radiation that caused him to become the Thing. And instead he ends up face to face with the Man-Thing. To sum up what's happening with the Molecule Man, he discovers pretty quickly when he accidentally drops the wand that the difference between the time, the time differential, the space-time differential, the way time passes in his world versus Earth, means that without the wand, he will age so rapidly it's basically like Christopher Lee dusting as Dracula.
Exactly.
And so with the wand, he's constantly replenishing himself. He sort of wanders away from the Man-Thing. I think it is interesting, though, that his abilities have been essentially drawn in by the nexus of all realities, that is the swamp. And we'll find out in a moment that he can't use the wand to sort of zap himself out of there because of that nexus.
Exactly. And once he discovers that, he also figures out he's going to have to keep, as you said, a constant flow of power from the wand to keep himself from dying. He also figures out that, the Man-Thing is not the one he seeks. So he goes wandering off, and the Man-Thing follows. Meanwhile, nearby, Ben Grimm makes the bus driver stop and gets out and jumps into the swamp, looking for the Man-Thing. But what he finds instead is the son of the Molecule Man.
Yeah, and again, every single panel in this portion of the story that Gil Kane has drawn Ben Grimm, I just love it. I mean, the art for the Thing in these panels is fantastic.
Yep. So
anyway,
they fight.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, they fight, and very quickly, the son of the Molecule Man hatches his plan. He makes both the Thing and the Man-Thing human again to rob them of their tremendous strength. He says they'll be naught but impotent observers while he completes his mission, the killing of the Fantastic Four. And that's what he does. Ben turns human. Ted Sallis reappears. Now, what I find interesting here, Ted Sallis has memories.
Yeah, I was going to say
the auto
same.
crash and becoming human again in the netherworld. And they quickly figure out what's going on. And
well, that's what I was going to say. I do think it's fascinating that Ted Sallis seems to be having cumulative memories, so that he does remember the previous issue where he was for 10 minutes or so human again.
Right.
He's very confused, but Ben Grimm now tells him this is Ted Sallis learning he is the Man-Thing.
That's right.
He's not aware of that, and now he's learning it, and now it's all sort of making sense to him. But it's almost like his memory is, somebody pushes pause. But his memory is cumulative. He does have memories of each time he is human again. So. Yep.
So we then get the son of the Molecule Man. He thinks his wand is malfunctioning, but an editorial box tells us the malfunction is not in the wand, but in the swamp. For here at the nexus of mystic forces, the laws of science oft go away, as in the accident that birthed the Man-Thing himself.
Now, the next bit is really twisted. So the Man-Thing now gets into Citrusville. He's outside the the extent of the influence of the Nexus, and his wand is working properly, and he basically starts fucking up Citrusville pretty bad.
That's
when
right.
he sees Ben Grimm and Ted Sallis, he wants to display for Grimm what he can do to him in vengeance for what he perceives the Fantastic Four did to his father. And he, with the power of the wand, transforms an ordinary guy on the street into the doppelganger of Reed Richards. With Reed Richards' powers, he stretches the guy to his limit, and then the guy dies.
Yeah, he explodes.
Yeah, it's twisted.
This is the most gruesome thing I remember reading as a kid in a Marvel comic, because Gil Kane draws it, and Steve Gerber has the Son of Molecule Man narrate it. There is no doubt what's happening on this page, and I am amazed they got it by the Comics Code, because he stretches him until the guy literally just explodes. Then he reverts him once he's dead. He reverts back to his normal form. And the caption tells us the sight fills Ben Grimm with revulsion and hatred. So many times in Marvel, it would be like the A-Team. You'd see the Punisher fire a bunch of bullets, but you didn't see the dead bodies. There's no doubt here. He says, you just killed an innocent.
Right.
It's some gruesome stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty sadistic, not even, it is sadistic. Let's not be unclear. So anyway, the Molecule Man sees the raging Ben Grimm. He doesn't like the fact that he's looking like Ben Grimm. He wants him to look like the enemy he came to fight and kill. So he transforms him back into the Thing, but chained up to these blocks of concrete, slabs of rock. And then Ted Sallis is trying to prevent Ben Grimm from basically performing for the Molecule Man. You're doing what he wants, he tells Ben Grimm, which frustrates the Molecule Man, and then he turns Ted Sallis back into the Man-Thing.
That's right. The Man-Thing, of course, doesn't recall anything of what happened, other than that the Thing and he were fighting. So he continues that fight. And then we get my favorite part of the issue. Ben grabs a fistful of the Man-Thing and throws it at the Son of Molecule Man, slapping him in the face with the mud and the gook.
With a wad of Man-Thing gook.
Yep. But that has the effect of knocking the wand from his grasp. And before he can reach it, he does what you said. He turns to dust.
Yeah, he does that Christopher Lee Hammer film Dracula. He withers and then becomes bones and then becomes dust.
Yep.
So the Thing picks up the Molecule Man's wand because he was human and he wants to be human, and he's trying to get it to work, thinking he can have it work again. It doesn't work. So the Man-Thing wanders away back toward the swamp. The Thing says, "Take a good look, kid," to this little kid who comes running up. There goes the only guy on Earth unluckier than me. And then the Thing basically says, "Oh, this wand doesn't work. Here, kid." Now, I don't know. I assume that this comes back into play later, but it seems especially irresponsible of Ben Grimm to hand this thing that's clearly some kind of all-powerful weapon into the hands of a kid who looks like he's maybe 6.
Well, this does come back later. What happens is we find out that the original Molecule Man, Owen Reese, he put his consciousness inside the wand. So his son brings the wand back to Earth and then gets killed. But the original Molecule Man's consciousness is still inside that wand. Eventually, he would regain a physical form. And then he gets reformed and tries to become a good guy for a long time. And we see the culmination of that in Marvel's original Secret Wars, where he becomes, the main character.
See, the big problem with characters like the Molecule Man is that he's just too powerful. It's just like, what do you do within the whole storyline is trying to figure out ways to make him less powerful, to make him defeatable.
Right.
Because in reality, like, the Molecule Man, if he existed in reality, would not be defeated in this story. He would just have, like, undone them on a molecular level, and they wouldn't exist anymore.
Exactly.
But in any case, so while I dislike the Molecule Man as a character, his presence in the story is counterbalanced by the presence of bashful Benjamin J. Grimm.
All right, folks. Well, that's our show for this week. Just a reminder, if you enjoy Defenders Dialogue, there are some other shows you might enjoy. They're all available wherever you listen to Defenders Dialogue, and those are The Horror Show with Brian Keene, Cosmic Shenanigans, and Grindcast. For more information on those shows or the history of Defenders Dialogue, just go to briankeene.com, click podcast/radio, and you'll find all the information there.
You know what I say, Brian?
What do you say to that, Chris?
I say Excelsior, true believers.
Excelsior indeed. We'll see you back here next week, folks.
Defenders Dialogue is a production of the Brian Keene Radio Network. You can listen to this episode and all previous episodes for free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play Music, and wherever else podcasts are available. Defenders Dialogue is written and produced by Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Our theme music is by Xander Harris. Our engineer is Matt Wilderson. Check out his books on Amazon.com. If you enjoyed this show, you might enjoy our other podcasts, The Horror Show with Brian Keene, Cosmic Shenanigans, and Grindcast. To advertise on Defenders Dialogue, visit briankeene.com and click Podcasts.